I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking about the film Year of the Fox. And I am joined today by director and executive producer Megan Griffiths, writer and producer Eliza Flug, and cast members Sarah Jeffery and Lexi Simonson. And Eliza, in starting with you, I know this is a very personal script that you wrote, and a lot of the elements that we see in the film are very autobiographical from your own experiences. And it's something where once you started working with the producers on the film, and then Megan came on board as a director and EP, that it became a really collaborative effort in terms of the continued development of the story. And I was really interested in that stage of development and how starting to collaborate so closely with all of them really helped you to kind of finesse and find some of the beats of the story even more strongly.
Well, it had originally been a book, so there were a lot of pages. And then it was finding, there was a whole story and a trajectory of moving into adulthood, actually, with this storyline. And so it was just finding the right part of the story that was going to make the most sense. Um, and I think that I wrote directly from the things that had really ignited the reason. So it was pretty easy to do. But the process of writing and making sure that my director was on board with what I was doing and having Lacey and Jennifer agree that that's something they wanted to see was the part of that collaborative process. And then once we found actresses that we really wanted to connect with and align with, we wanted people to also have an opinion on what they were reading and that story arc. So that was an important part of the process as well.
Yeah, I love that. And in talking about the casting for, Ivy and Layla, Megan, I heard you say that one of the things that you did, because there wasn't an opportunity to do in-person chemistry reads, that you took the footage from auditions and you cut them together with different performances to see how they would read against each other. And I was really interested in how you came up with the idea to do that, because I think it's such a brilliant concept.
Oh, thanks. It's something I did actually for the first time many years ago on my film, The Off Hours. But it's just in lieu of having people in an actual room where you can observe their chemistry, I think it's helpful to just kind of see if they feel like friends when you just cut them together. In this case, friends. And these two were, so, Eliza and I looked at so many people over these sort of self tapes and Zoom callbacks and all these things. And it was these two really just emerged, and it felt like there was something that would connect the two of them. So looking at them, they read the same scene, so I was able to cut it together and sort of like kind of make the eye lines work, sort of. And watching that was really helpful. And then I think I showed it to Sarah and Lexi on the last day of production, just to show them, like, before they knew each other, they still felt like friends.
So fun.
I love that. And in coming over to you, Sarah, I've heard you speak before about how when you're developing and finding a character, that sometimes you find it really helpful to start with the physical, and sometimes it's really helpful to start with the more emotional side. And because Ivy's someone who is so kind of like inward with a lot of her emotions, I was interested in if the emotional side was the starting point in finding her for you.
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think she's a little bit more subdued than until there are select moments in the film where she kind of reaches her limit. But I think it was important for me to understand the emotional through line and trajectory, so which was outlined pretty perfectly for me in Eliza's script, and Megan helped me really flush out anything I was just needing a little bit more clarity on. I just wanted to be really specific with Ivy and her story, and thankfully I can relate to her on several levels. Mostly just her feeling out of place and her feeling, othered, and just, yeah, my heart kind of just broke for her. And so naturally, yeah, I was definitely emotions first, and then I think like reflective of Ivy, like the physical, like the wardrobe was like not an afterthought, but it was like, I don't know. I think the emotionality of her storyline probably informed everything else for instead of the inverse.
No, that's so great. And Lexi, with playing Layla, she's someone who's very much been forced to grow up before she should have been in her world. And I was interested in how, even just reading the script and getting those details of, well, her dad left and it's just her and her mom, but even her mom has kind of abandoned her at this point in the story because she's gone off with a new guy that she's met. So she's really being completely self-sufficient for herself every single day, and how that really set up the foundation of creating and crafting this character.
Yeah, I mean, she was within that. I felt like I could connect with it to a degree. My parents were very young when they had me, so I've always been more. Once I reached a certain age, we were very much more friends than the traditional like parent relationship. So I really understood that dynamic of someone who just has different expectations of the adults around her. She's not expecting any adult to treat her as a child. And so that was a really nice connection. That was a way that I was kind of in. And she's just so loose and free, which was really helpful. Because I very much enjoy, if I'm going to play someone who's technically very far away from me, if I can still really get my body incorporated into it, that really helps a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And Megan, in terms of the directorial choices that you were making, because Ivy is such a center point to the story, and she feels like an outsider trying to figure out how to fit in, and so she's someone who's very observational of the world around her. How did that idea of a character who's observing the world around her shape the way that you thought about your shot choices and the way that you wanted the camera to bring us into the story?
Yeah, the fact that she's our sort of conduit into this story is so much part of the script because it is written from someone who was an observer of that world, and sort of trying to figure it out as she went. And I thought of Ivy as this person who's helping our audience understand this world that isn't commonly known. And so one of the things when I made a film years ago called Eden, and we used a lot of we played with like subjectivity and objectivity in camera placement in that movie a lot, and it really informed the choices in this movie actually because we really wanted to keep it very subjective to Ivy's experience. So throughout the movie, the camera is usually either a close up on Sarah, Ivy, or over her shoulder at what she's seeing. So there is a lot of real, like literally looking at the world sort of from her point of view, and understanding these things through her eyes. So those are choices that were specific for sure and all organic to how it was written.
And even connected to that, Eliza, with the script, we have the fact that Ivy's observing this world around her and trying to figure out how she fits into it. But you've created these strands where almost all of the characters are going through their own journey of how do I fit into the world around me? If we take her mom wanting to join the tennis club once they move back to Seattle, and it's like, nobody plays tennis there. They all just want to belong, to feel included in something. And so how did you want all of the characters to, in their own way, feel like outsiders trying to connect and trying to fit in?
Um, well, I mean, I think that was just a period in my life where I started to be aware of my parents as human beings, and I drew from those memories. And then from there, went through old journals and looked at moments of my life going, was that really a thing, or was that just me being a dramatic person? And I think I was always one of those people that was questioning her emotional integrity because I was like, what is this? And what is this to a teenage person? What is this to a 20 something person? Like there was a lifelong dichotomy in my family schema. Like it just wasn't the greatest thing in the world. And so writing this was fair, like I said, fairly easy because it was me kind of breaking up with my own reality in a way, and then dissecting it and putting it back together and being like, well, this is what is true, and this is the thing we're talking about. So like with Pauline, I wrote that character based on me going through divorce and the way I was behaving, and also on the storyline of what my mom had gone through when she was a flight attendant. So there was like an amalgam situation with the majority of the characters in this story.
Yeah, and Sarah, in playing Ivy, there's a bit of a sense of who she is for herself, and then everything that she thought she knew suddenly gets stripped away, or she finds out things that make her feel completely disillusioned, and then she has to kind of figure out how to put the pieces back together and becomes this kind of new version of herself towards the end of the film. How did you set about just the way that you as an actor wanted to chart that journey for her? Because there's so many little nuanced beats and changes that you had to craft.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a through line to Megan and Eliza at all times was really important to me. Megan does an amazing job of running a set overall, but like really just knows what's going on. She's got the picture. She's a very reliable um, asset for an actress and or an actor, and that paired with like tracking things in like a sort of journal format, not in the sense that I was journaling as Ivy, although that is something I sometimes do as I just didn't happen to on this one, but writing down like basically our day out of days in like a format that was like more comprehensive to me, because those files online are sometimes a little bit hard to read. So I would know, okay, this is the order we're shooting it in. Now, what's the order of actual events? So I could go back to, because when you film things, it's usually not sequential. So that was important. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, it does, and I love those details. And Lexi with Layla, there's a moment where she's with Ivy at a party, and she's kind of observing this woman, and she's kind of complimenting, like, "Oh, look how confident she is, and the way that she moves." And so you kind of get this sense with her that there's the version of who she is, and then there's this version that she's trying to emulate these women that she's watching and observing around her. And so I was just interested in you kind of finding those two different sides of, like, who is she with her best friend, but who is she when she's in these very adult situations and trying to project this idea of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I really was able to connect with and tap into, because I've always felt um I've always been like the cute girl. I've never been like the hot or sexy one in the friend group. I'm shorter. I'm just like bing bing bing, and I have a bit of a personality. So it's I've always felt I feel a lot of pressure sometimes to try and be something bigger than myself in terms of like look or whatever. And so that was something that Layla's really dealing with, because she is growing up. And so she has this idea of what being a woman is, but she's had no strong female influence to actually be able to base that off of. So all of her influences are a little bit warped. And that's something that she really struggles with. And I've really, not that I've struggled with that particular thing, but it wasn't until like very recently in my adult life I've allowed myself to stop trying to, like, for even events or anything, to stop trying to be sexy, and stop trying to look sexy and do my makeup and my clothing really certain, quote unquote, um, the masculine or the patriarchal definition of sexy. And I feel like that's what Layla's really dealing with, is trying to fit into this patriarchal version of sexy. And so, yeah, I think I love the last two scenes that you see her, the one with Ivy on the porch, and then in the bathroom. She finally like looks and sounds like a girl. She's not trying to be this thing. And it's a really refreshing kind of like zoom, going all the way back to actually the beginning of where Layla starts. So
I love that. And Eliza and Megan, I know that Eliza, you were on set throughout shooting as well. And, the two of you worked incredibly closely. And I was interested for both of you how just working so closely and Eliza being on set was really beneficial to really figuring out how to tell this story throughout the process for both of you.
I'll start. I think because this is not a world that I come from, I really leaned on Eliza to help me figure out how to depict it. And I leaned on I think I found it very useful to have a character who was discovering this world because I really related to the Ivy sort of viewpoint, but also, wanting to get the details as right as we could, and so that it would feel, based in an authentic reality. And so, throughout prep and production, that was something that I was really grateful to have Eliza there for, because she just, obviously this is her world. She knows it better than anyone.
And for you, Eliza, what was that experience?
What I really loved was having the access to someone who was going to take a story and, you know, directors do what they want with screenplays, right? I mean, that's just they take it and that's the deal that I agreed to. And at the same time, she didn't just leave me alone, go, thanks for the writing, bye. We actually, really spent some time together making sure that this was authentic. And it was so much so on set that I would get sick a lot. Like I'd throw up and have to leave set. So I was like, I think I wrote this a little too true. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Sarah, in playing Ivy as well, when her parents are going through their divorce, it's not just the fact that her parents are no longer living together and her mom are moving back to Seattle, and that's a whole shift for her. But she has these other parental figures. She has her skating instructor, who's been a really parental figure to her, and even the housekeeper that she's grown up with. And I was interested in what you found in playing Ivy and just the idea of losing these really maternal women that are so important to her, as much as going through the divorce of her parents at the same time.
I love that question. Well, speaking to Ziomi, the lovely housekeeper, and uh, Amanda Brugel, who plays
Aya.
Aya.
sorry, brain fart. They are both incredible actresses and also women of color, and that's something that was not a part of her immediate family, being adopted and also living in an area where that just wasn't predominant, which I think was really like vital and important to her, and a bit of a lifeline, like a lot of bit of a lifeline, as we see in several scenes in the film. Yeah, and I can relate to my aunt, who I lost to cancer from when I was 12, I think, still feels like that exact thing of like losing a maternal figure, before maybe you're ready to lose them. And it's funny, I didn't even put that together while we were filming, but just having the way you framed that question made me think of just how important those maternal figures are outside of like my mom is my best friend. I'm so lucky to have her, but I think sisterhood and just relationships with women are so important, and that's something I also love that we dissect in this film, is what it means to be in relation to female friends and women, and which are going to set good examples and which are you going to let influence you. And yeah, kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah, I think Aya and Ziomi are really important characters, and both incredible actresses, and warm and beautiful, and really made me feel like that was the space to be safe. So.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And Lexi, you were talking a little bit before about just finding the physicality of a character, and especially with the fact that you grew up as a dancer. I was interested in kind of the same way that you were charting out the emotional space of your character, how you also really thought about the physical differences and the different points that she's at in the story.
Yeah, I mean, something that has been brought to my attention a lot is I personally am sober, and I've also never done like hard drugs. And the comment that I get the most is, how do you play such a hyped up on coke girl when you've never even done coke? Like, that's like a common question I get. And I think it really is just all like physicality and just channeling like tension versus like release and things like that. And that was just a really fun thing to play with, that Megan was awesome and really encouraged. And I always knew there was no shame or embarrassment in it. I always knew I could go really far. And if it was too far, she would take me back. Or if it wasn't enough, she would push me up. And it was always this like real physical um challenge as well. And the outfits she would wear also had a lot to do with it. I mean, I am a short leg, long torso girly, and there were a lot of low rise jeans. So that was like something, but it really helped in my mind, like how this girl holds her body and how her body moves through the space when she's operating in like pretty uncomfortable clothing, you know, tight, tiny tops and short shorts or skirts or shirts or dresses and like boots and things like that. So all of that was a really big influence as well. The wardrobe, her wardrobe was a really, really big influence on just the physicality, but really the character and who she was.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
I'll just add, I think that what Lexi and Sarah both did in the clothes that they were wearing was really a huge part of their characters, because Ivy is always like sort of adjusting her clothes and sort of closed a little bit and like not sure about whether she's chosen the right thing, whether she looks good in it. What, you know, there's a lot of like question marks that you can just feel. Whereas Layla walks in and it's like whatever fell out of her closet onto her body is fine. Like she's gonna wear, you know, it's like a total different
So front footed. She's so front footed in
yeah,
everything she does.
just a like a level of ease that like I think I certainly would love a little dose of in my life.
Yeah.
Nice.
We even like made sure that Ivy had like long sleeve, like you know when you're feeling a little bit insecure or anxious, you like play with longer sleeves. Like there was a lot of that and a lot of feeling like she had like a shield almost, which I can certainly relate to. Like with the body image stuff, is just like kind of hiding your body as much as you can. Is like a it's like a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
yeah,
Props to Rebecca Luke, our costume designer,
Yeah, it
for
was
thinking
wonderful.
about all these things
She
too.
sourced some fucking rad vintage shit for me.
Oh, so good.
I have some of it in my closet actually.
Same.
it's great. Eliza, also one of the things that I love in the way that you've written the script is, you know, we see a teenage girl learn certain things about her father and the
Mhm.
disillusion that creates, but there's also this kind of broader context of the culpability of everybody in this community and, you know, kind of
Mhm.
everybody seeing what's going on but turning a blind eye. And even the conversation that she has with her mom later on, where her mom's like, I was trying to shield you from certain things, but maybe I shouldn't have, because maybe that made it worse in the long run. And I was interested in how it was just as important to tell that side of the story as it was the individual story of Ivy and the things that she discovers about her dad.
It was. And originally writing it was, I wanted to kind of play with each character a little bit and make sure they had an arc that really seemed like they were going somewhere in the future. So we didn't think of these characters as just ending, and then that's the end of the story. And in particular with each of the female characters, I wanted to make sure that there was some sort of layering of different kinds of personalities for each character, that they weren't in unison, that they weren't agreeing on their theories on how they were being treated or how they were treating themselves. Just because that I think is one of the bigger parts of the story is Layla's choices, being left in her senior year of high school because her mom's like trying to lay on someone who can, fund her lifestyle and her daughters, but mostly that was part of it. And then uh, Pauline was a big one, but I have to say the skating coach was supposed to be the kind of the sage and the person to ask advice to and be calm with, because that's removed from family and removed from her home life. That was like her safe, neutral space. It wasn't just skating; it was really the ice rink itself and Aya, that character. So each of the women, and then if you look at someone like Xiaomi, and if you look at like some of the other girlfriends that are in some of the scenes and scene partners, then they're all making different choices and think that what they're doing is acceptable and it's what their mom did, or it's what they see as their only way forward. So that was a big thing, and I drew from that experience of seeing all these women with all these different, each woman in my life was very different, and I was very different depending on how they were treating me or how I treated myself. So I drew from that. I think that answers the question. I'm not sure.
No, it does in a lot of detail. And
Okay.
Sarah, when Ivy meets this character who's played by Balthazar, she kind of starts to think about the way that he looks at her, and he makes her feel very special. And even just that first conversation, we kind of see the grooming language of like, oh, you remind me of Ingrid Bergman, and the way
Mhm.
that he immediately starts complimenting her and, laying the groundwork of I can offer you opportunities for the things that you want to pursue in life. And in playing Ivy, how did you want her to feel in response to feeling like someone was really looking at her and seeing her in this way?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, Balt was an amazing person to work with in such a kind of awkward position, and like a very specific character that was based off of someone very real and very unnerving and a literal criminal. Um, and I think he carried that really, really well and made me feel like it was just a safe space. We were just, we were doing our jobs, and he was very supportive in that. Um, that said, I think it was, for her, it wasn't even that she was like feeling the bubbling of like romanticism. It was more that she had a spotlight on her for once, and like didn't really know what to do with those feelings, but it felt different and felt good. You know, it felt good being someone who was largely ignored. Um, and as the audience and as people who aren't in that part of our lives anymore, we can clearly see what's at play. But for her, when you zoom in, it's just like I feel uncomfortable in myself. I feel like everyone else around me is different, better, prettier, thinner. And this very powerful man, good looking man, is giving me attention. What shall I do with it? And that's kind of, um, yeah, like Act Two explores, and the rest of the film really explores what she decides to do with it. Um, but yeah, it was very unnerving, and filming that bedroom scene with him was, I felt actually like quite sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Um, just knowing that that is something very real that really happens to that every woman can speak to an experience that, even if it's not on that scale, like I can think of so many experiences, unfortunately on sets, unfortunately in big settings, where I've been made to feel really uncomfortable. And um we didn't have, and we're still working on it, but we didn't have access to the tools back then, certainly, to uh like call for SOS. It just wasn't like that. Um, and that's why I think movies like this are really important too.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And, Megan, in the way that you've directed this film, you kind of capture that essence of, it's this beautiful place, but actually, if you look beneath the surface, here's everything that's going on. And so, how did you want it to, on the surface, look quite beautiful? This lovely home that really feels tied into the countryside and the nature around it. But then, if you look beneath the surface, there's all these other details that you suddenly find.
Um, I wanted to just comment a little bit
Yeah.
on the Baltasar Getty character, because there's something you asked in your question to Sarah that about the grooming element that I just want to comment about before I move on to that, because I thought there's something in Eliza's script that I think is really informative about how those kind of relationships can work, and not work in the world, but how can they operate. And the so I was noticing it more even in like the edit room, because there's all these little steps and stages that those two characters go through together, where he's basically asking for an okay at every turn, for all these small little steps into this dark place that, it's almost like he's getting consent all the way up until the end and making her complicit in her own situation. When you're saying yes to all those small questions, it's hard to turn around and say no. And so I think that that's something that's really interesting about how his character is written. It just really, it came out at me when I was putting the film together in the edit room. And when I watch it now, just watching him get her to sort of freely walk in to this bad situation, and before she even realizes quite how bad the situation is. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. And then also, yeah, so the Aspen in the 90s and now is a very beautiful place, and so being able to depict that world, we shot some of the film there, very mostly scenic, taking advantage of the beautiful mountains and getting some drone footage of all sorts of parts of that environment. But one of the things we talked about, even in that shoot where we were mostly getting, trees and mountains and rocks, we were talking about how to depict them in a way that felt vaguely threatening, even through their beauty, and sort of these sort of slow push-ins and angles that kind of put them in slightly ominous contexts. And so that was something that I think, because it's used throughout the movie, it sort of reinforces itself over and over again. And then we took it into the actual shooting of the rest of the characters as well when we were doing that. So definitely it was a part of the overall concept, is just, this is a world that is very beautiful, but is also hiding some dark secrets.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so impressed with the work that you've all done on this film. And I feel like even just hearing you talk, there's so many details to even like go back and look at again each time you watch it. So congratulations on the movie, and thank you for talking about it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.